And so now my sign is not as tall as their sign, and they say it's because of the zoning. Well, does that really make sense to anybody, just so that they could do this kind of business instead of that kind of business? No. Let's set the corridor up about the way it looks and feels, and the type of business that we encourage in that area, and the type of business that exists in that area. Then we have a couple of little catch-alls. One is to separate whatever kind of business. Next thing I know, after being in business 40 years, they're complaining to town hall that my stuff is too ugly, or too nasty, or too loud. I learned a long time ago that we have businesses that are ugly and loud and things like that. So I created a dish shop, and not people go to the auto repair just to go shopping. So we sort of push those apart a little bit. So instead of like your old B2, B3, C2, C3, where they look at the list in your current ordinance, where you got major auto repair, hair salon, need I keep listing them, that are right there in one place, as if that makes some kind of sense.
Right.
And it makes no sense. So you've got the VSR district. So we identify these existing businesses, and we start pinning those down with those designations on your draft map, which is this one right here, your zoning map. Because zoning is really kind of where you are today. So we back into those areas, into the neighborhoods, and say, well, this area's got about 2 units an acre, and the lot sizes are relatively consistent. That looks like about 2 unit per acre type of zoning. I'm not smart enough to do this the hard way. 3, okay, 2 or 3, make 1 acre, okay. So you're able to sort of look at those, like the Irish Creek subdivision that was done out there a few years ago. A drastic example out. No, you're not going to get one yet. You might someday, but Burkdale and things like that. Okay, now you can start to identify with what I'm talking about. Afton Village, all those things where you got pizza with, condos on top of the pizza place and all kinds of stuff going on. That's when you get into your mixed use too. So you got these tools in your toolbox. If you need them, you got them. So we deal with the mixed use that way. And then the last category, and I've sort of circled, last 2 categories, and I've kind of circled around the horn on this, is your downtown, your main street. And I circled back around. I said it's last but not. Cabarrus County decided to drop some good old 30-foot setbacks around as if there was new subdivisions. Wait, don't do new development standards in old areas that had no standards when they were developed. That's crazy. So I call it the BZ era, the before zoning era. And I call the district the residential Main Street transition. It's that Main Street right out of the downtown area going out into the villages. Residential transition. Image for a reason. I'm going to walk you through some terminology. And I know I'm probably going to get across the walkways and streets and everything else, and to the other side, across the yard, and up the other side. The streetscape is like a goalpost. It's from top, down, across, and up the other side. That space is where if you sat out here for 4 hours, you'd see people coming and going to work and coming and going from school and doing this and going out and playing and working in the yard, doing all these things. That streetscape space is responsible for a substantial amount of the cost of development of a go-to district, SFR, single-family residential, which you can do 1 and 2 family in. That's by state statute. We don't get to say no duplex anymore. Okay? So if anyone wants a duplex, they get a duplex. Don't ask me. Not an option. To that in a minute, but it was fairly narrow right away. And then it makes accommodations, like if you're going to slap easements all over people's property. May I say that again?
Yes, please repeat it.
It is a terrible idea to slap easements all over people's property. The new standards move away from that. Okay? Your draft standards move away from that. They increased the street right of way for new subdivisions to 60 feet. They do that for a reason. They move the side bad or good. If I'm talking to one of the aldermen and we're standing out here in front of my house on the sidewalk, and we're chatting, and a car goes by 30, 35 miles an hour, and it feels like it's under your elbow, you're not going to feel good about that place, because most of us know what we don't like more than we know what we like when it comes to the experience. Does everybody have their favorite intersection? Here is, it has one mistake in it, and this particular location, they were supposed, this is the standard you have in your new draft ordinance for your SFR3, by the way, with the exception that that sidewalk was not supposed to have a 6-foot planter strip back to that right of way. It was supposed to have an 8-foot, so that sidewalk is actually 2 feet too close to the curb. That picture was the right angle to shoot, but the city planning staff member didn't catch that on their drawings. And so it got put in 2 feet wrong on both sides. Every other street in there is right, except that one. So imagine that sidewalk being a little bit further back. Take a guess how much it costs for that sidewalk to be 2 more feet back. About that much less. Not more, less. Because the aprons tend not to completely feather before you get to that point. If you go 8 feet, your aprons are pretty much on your driveway, feathered back, so you actually... So all these little things have to be taken into account when we do this. If we're going to have standard SFR, and this is SFR3. SFR2 is different. The houses move back a little bit, things of that nature all change. SFR1 even further. I'm just showing. If one of the big tract builders comes to town and you've already got property zoned R8, y'all have any property zoned R8? Like most of the town?
Yes.
Guess what? You can stop them from building tighter than this.
That's right.
These are 11,600 square foot minimum lots. Your ordinance has 6. Wherever you needed to go. You felt a neighborhood, 30, 25, 10, 20, big, nice, even, crazy, absolutely idiotic numbers. Most of us see the world we live in about 5 feet off the ground. There's no relationship to those numbers. 100 foot, 80 foot, well, I think it'll be 75. I think it'll be 80. Most zoning ordinances that I replace or update were the result of good intentions sitting around the room throwing numbers out there because I feel like 100's good. And somebody said, well, I think 75 would be enough. Walk outside and measure those and get a feel for what you're actually talking about. I see houses built in the country right now, and I see them built at about 100 feet off the right-of-way. I ride a bike through the country. Motorcycle, bicycle, doesn't matter. I have to stay in motion. And I know what happened. The builder said, well, how far back you want to go? About 100 feet. And then they get out there in the country, and you're talking about a big piece of property. A house 100 feet feels like you're right up against the road. It's all relative. It's all relative. If you're in a small neighborhood, slower. Terminating vistas. Now, I'm using examples. We're not talking about building everything in here. We're talking about using examples. The one on top is an entryway coming in to a neighborhood, and at the end of it is a big, giant white building. In front of it's a fountain and a roundabout with a park on the left, a big park, a small park on the right, and then houses to the left of that white one and houses to the right. Aside from those that have already seen this, does anybody know what that white building is? It's 4 townhouses. So we use the side streets. You also see architecture up your street, terminating a vista. At the bottom is a terrible picture because the trees have grown too big now. But that's a clubhouse at the end of a big plaza street and everything. So if you look for almost a half a mile down that street, that's what you see at the end. So terminating a vista. Next slide, please. Street amenities, like the street light choices, the signage. These street lights are what are in your draft ordinance. That is a very inexpensive. It's actually one of the most inexpensive street lights that Duke offers. It's called the Open Traditional. It's got an LED up in the hood, so it looks like a traditional English. Next slide, please. Open spaces. Emphasis on common open space. The buildings on the top are surround a big triangular-shaped park